Hi, friends. Before we get into the episode, we have a quick announcement. Kelly and I love making the Breakout, and to keep giving each episode our all, we've decided to move to monthly releases starting in March.
We're still here with the same great show, just releasing slightly less often. So keep listening, and as always, please follow the show, post a review, and give us a 5-star rating. It helps more people find us who just might need to hear these stories. Now on to the show.
You can't think your way out of a body problem. You can't intellectualize your way when you're feeling stuck. You can't think of a solution. You have to address what's happening in the body and the brain before you can actually take those steps forward.
Deanna DeBara knows all about feeling stuck. And if you're a human navigating life right now, you probably do too. It's that odd sense of not wanting to stay where you are, but not being able to, or perhaps knowing how to, move forward.
After experiencing stuckness at many points in her life,
Many points.
Deanna learned that being stuck isn't just an emotional state. It actually has physiological connections, and there's much more to it than a lack of motivation. So she decided it was time to start a bigger conversation about what being stuck is actually about. And that's when she launched her fascinating podcast, Season of Stuck.
At the end of every episode of The Breakout, we ask our guests what their advice would be to someone who feels stuck. In this episode, Deanna helps us dive into what that really means and what you can do about it.
Welcome to The Breakout, a show about smashing through life's little boxes and forging your own path. I'm Dr. Carrie Ulrich.
And I'm Kelly Gunther. Carrie and I are people and change experts, best friends, and business partners. We've spent more than 25 years helping employees and leaders change. With love and a lot of laughs, we're here to empower you to live life on your terms. Our methods may seem a bit unconventional, but trust us, they will change your life.
Let's be real for a second. We know change can sometimes be scary. Heck, it even scares us. But staying the same can be even scarier. On The Breakout, we prove that you can escape expectations. And best of all, we show you how. Well, Deanna, I feel like we already know you. But let's start for the folks who don't know you. Let's start with introductions. What do you do? And what does your podcast, Season of Stuck, encourage others to break out of?
Well, first of all, Kelly, Dr. Carrie, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm so excited to be here. I am a writer and I am the host of the Season of Stuck podcast, which is a podcast about what I now know is the very universal human experience of feeling stuck. So we dive into how and why we get stuck, what that experience feels like, how to learn and grow from it, and ultimately how to get unstuck and step into the next version of ourselves in our lives. And the podcast is really designed to help people break out of the inertia that comes along with feeling stuck between the person that you used to be and the person that is emerging, the person that you're going to be, this next version of yourself. That can be an uncomfortable place to be. And so this podcast is about addressing the normalcy and letting people know that we all find ourselves in that place at one point or another, or if you're like me, at many points, and that it's something that is totally workable, and there are ways to break through that inertia and step into that next version of your life.
I love that. I remember in change management when I heard all these people complaining about things. And I would mistakenly sometimes, Deanna, say, oh, they're ready to change because they're complaining so much. We'll make this change. And they will just jump right in. And then we'd make the change and then they wouldn't change. And what you found too, and all this research suggests that there's an actual science to feeling stuck. So what's in our brains that's keeping us stuck?
Yeah. So prior to making this podcast, I really thought about stuckness as an emotional experience, a feeling of being stuck, which it certainly is. There are feelings associated with it, but that's not all that it is. There's also like a physiological and psychological kind of like chain reaction happening when you're experiencing stuckness, and more specifically with the nervous system. So when you're stuck, generally you become overwhelmed with stress, and then your nervous system reacts to that. So instead of being in a place where you are able to feel motivated and move forward and make complex decisions, your brain is kind of stuck in a place of either fight or flight or freeze mode. And when that happens, all of the parts of your brain that are responsible for motivation and decision making and all of the things that you really need to get unstuck are kind of frozen in place, and your body is just doing what it can to survive. And until you address that nervous system reaction, it doesn't matter how much you want to change. You can't change because your body is stuck. And I had an amazing therapist on my podcast. Her name is Britt Frank, and she actually wrote a book about this called The Science of Stuck. And she said something that stuck with me so deeply, and that was that you can't think your way out of a body problem. Right? So you can't intellectualize your way when you're feeling stuck. You can't like think of a solution. You have to address what's happening in the body and the brain before you can actually take those steps forward.
Yeah, it's so powerful because you're right. If I broke my arm, at some point, I just can't think my way out of that. Just let me think about it.
You can't willpower your way to a mended arm. It doesn't matter how much you visualize yourself with an unbroken arm, or how many books you read about broken arms and like how to mend them. Like, it's a body problem, and you have to address the body, get a cast, get it set, all of those things.
Yeah. I appreciate, that you're bringing to life, not just the emotional piece of it, but the physical. You have to do both. It's a mind and body. And that's why I think your podcast is just so powerful, because all of us know what it's like to be stuck. We've all had it in our lives. And so what are some of the early stories of stuckness and how they shaped your perspective on what it means to be stuck in your life?
Oh gosh, I have so many. Like, if you could see my brain, it's just like cataloging all of the many experiences and times that I've been stuck. Yeah. And I think what's interesting is, so like, I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not a like therapist or a mental health clinician. I'm not like an expert in the true sense of the word. I am just a person that has experienced a lot of stuckness in my life, and finally got to a place where I wanted to use my skills, like as a writer, as a, person who's done a lot of research, to figure a way out. When I think back, I have been stuck in pretty much every place in every way that you could think of, whether career, relationship, personal growth journey, body image, like all of these different things. I think that one of the most profound experiences of early stuckness that I had was in my late teens and early 20s. I had a very serious drinking problem, like full-blown alcohol use disorder. And that disorder made me the most stuck that I have ever been. Like, drinking isn't something that you do, it's something that you are. And by the end, I was so stuck in these patterns and behaviors and addiction that like I could not take another step forward. Ultimately, I stopped drinking. When I got to that place where I couldn't take a step forward, I raised my hand and I said, hey, I need help. And I was able to get support in pushing me forward until I could address what was happening in my body and brain and start taking those steps forward myself. And that experience profoundly shaped me and who I am today. I stopped drinking when I was 25, and today I'm 40. So it's been 15 years. Wow. And that experience of being so stuck really gave me a lot of tools and skills and empathy for dealing with stuckness in my life today. And then my most recent period of serious stuckness was a couple of years ago in my career. As I said, I'm a writer, and that industry is changing rapidly with the introduction of generative AI. And so I found myself in a place where this career that I had spent a decade of my life building and getting to a certain place, like, was feeling less and less viable by the day. And I found myself just not knowing what to do. Like, what do I do? The stuff that I've been doing for 10 years is no longer working. But what I'm going to do and what comes next has not fully emerged yet. Like, I don't know what that looks like. So I stayed kind of in this in-between place for months and months and months. And it was through that discomfort of being in that place that ultimately led to the spark of the idea that would become the Season of Stuck podcast.
We'll get back to the interview after this quick break.
Let's face it, modern work life is complicated.
But good news, we're here for you. I'm Kayla Lopez.
And I'm Kyle Hagee.
And together, we've helped thousands of Morning Brew subscribers grow in their careers.
And now, as the co-host of Per My Last Email, we're bringing that advice straight to you each week with hot takes and tactics on how to succeed in every area of work.
Whether that's figuring out if you're being underpaid.
Or how to stand out in a remote work environment.
So join us each week on Per My Last Email on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You've said in some of your podcasts that initially it feels that stuckness can feel like a personal failing. Again, it's all a mind problem. I'm not motivated enough. I can't start exercising. I can't be a better parent or something like that. So how did you figure out that it's not just kind of your personal failing or Carrie's personal failing, that it's really this universal human behavior and issue that we're all having?
Well, first of all, I 100% experienced stuckness as a personal failing for years, for the majority of my life. Every time I would find myself coming up against a wall, another relationship that didn't work out, another question about how to move forward in my career, another feeling of I wasn't living up to my full potential, whatever stuckness I was experiencing at the time, I always experienced it as something that was wrong with me specifically, that I, Deanna, was failing in some way. And that is why I kept running into these stuck places. And it was just this last period of major stuckness, the one that preceded the podcast, where I figured out that that wasn't true. And I figured that out in two ways. So number one, I started doing research into stuckness and like what was actually happening when I was running into these stuck places. Like I wanted to learn more about what is actually happening in my brain, my body, my mind, my spirit when I'm feeling this. And then obviously that gave me a lot of insight. But then the real kicker was that I started talking about it. You know, for the majority of my life, I kept these things to myself, what I felt were my failings. And I started talking about it with more people. And something really profound happened, which is that when I would talk about stuckness with other people, 100% of the time, those people would mirror that experience back to me. Every single person that I talked to had their own experience with feeling stuck. And so the more conversations that I had, the more I realized this is not a me thing. And it's not a them thing. It is a foundational human thing that we all experience. And that was a big part of the motivation to make the podcast, because I know how I felt in my stuckness, which was alone and like a failure. And if there is anyone out there who is in their stuckness feeling the same way, my hope for Season of Stuck is that it shows them that they're not alone, that this is not a failing, that this is just a part of being human and they don't have to go through it on their own.
Thank you for that, because you're so right. I'm sure you've heard the abuse lives in the darkness. And I think that's it for everyone. When we don't share, we feel like it's only happening to us, or maybe there's some shame to it. And we start to share, all of a sudden we realize, oh my goodness, that person dealt with it as well. You talked a little bit about the change in your job and you were getting stuck, but why a podcast?
That is a great question. So I have been a podcast enthusiast for many, many years, and I'm also a writer. And the stuckness that I was experiencing was in large part brought on by circumstances outside of my control, right? The rise of generative AI, things shifting in my industry. But if I was being really honest with myself, there was a stuckness that I was feeling even before that, which was this stuckness of not feeling fully fulfilled in the kind of work that I was doing. Like, I had built my business to a really good place. Like, I was kind of cruising along, but I could do it in my sleep. And I felt this like deep pull to do something that was more in service to other people. And so I knew that I wanted to use my voice in a way that like aligned with my values and like could truly be helpful, like even to like one other person. So as I was in this like kind of tornado of stuckness, I was really trying to find a way to use my voice and my skills and my professional qualities that I have spent a decade building up in like a new and different way. And it was like a light bulb moment where I was like, I have listened to so many podcasts, like I could try to do a podcast. So it just felt like kind of a natural next step, a scary next step, but it's also addressing that stuckness that I was feeling, of feeling unfulfilled and feeling like the work that I was doing didn't really have any purpose or meaning. I don't feel that way today. I don't feel stuck in that way at all.
That's so beautiful. And thank you for sharing your vulnerability. And once you do it, then you feel like, oh, it's not so bad.
Yeah, this could be a me thing, but I navigated most of my life with the idea that vulnerability pushed people away. That if I let people see like the messy, real, kind of like not together parts of me, that they would be like, ooh, I'm sorry, I don't want anything to do with that. But I have found that the opposite is true, that when you speak from the heart, when you share the things that are hard or messy or difficult or human, that it actually brings people closer in and it forms like a more genuine connection.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And I think most of us, Deanna, are kind of raised in that curate your brand or your image. Don't talk about that. Some families have that way more than other families too. Don't you air our dirty laundry. And that vulnerability is so powerful when it's done correctly. Sometimes you don't want to be so much of a hot mess that people are like, I don't even want to hang out with you. But
yeah, oversharing is a thing.
Oversharing, like way too much. Maybe someone started a call one time talking about their like vaginal surgery with people she didn't really know. And I thought, you know, I'm for pushing the boundaries, but that one, I'm like, you don't even know these people.
I feel like there is like a balance, right?
There's
like
a little balance,
There's an appropriate balance, but I feel like the pendulum is swinging a little bit the other way. Like I came up in my 20s in like the age of social media where everyone was a brand, right? You were curating your life and putting out these like highlight reels. When I would see other people's highlight reels, I would feel less than because my life didn't look like that.
100%.
And I think that we're seeing, you know, people moving away from that and being like, that's not real life. That perfection we've been, you know, kind of consuming for however many years, it's not the real stuff. And now you're seeing more people being willing to be open about the challenges, the messiness, the stuckness that they experience in their lives.
I think what was interesting for me is if we go back to expectations at times can be unknown. They are so common, like get married, have a kid, that we don't even question it. So being stuck and thinking that it is because you don't have enough self-discipline, that it is simply your own problem, I think is another one of those expectations. And I think Deanna really helped us understand that there is this brain pattern that happens to you, that you're not the only one. And I think that's what's so important when we uncover these very universal truths.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think it's just incredibly validating to know that there are other people who struggle with the very things that you do. It can be very isolating, and so it makes you maybe question or be hypersensitive to a lot of things. But the first step is always just validating and being okay with the feeling that you have.
I think she removes to the shame of it. I think so many of us, when we're stuck, we feel this stigma and this shame because, again, well, just power through it. Just use your grit. Just toughen up. So I think it's wonderful that Deanna takes away that stigma. When you release your shame, then you could actually work on it. What are some of the guests and some of the stories they've shared that have really helped you with your stuckness?
Oh my goodness. There have been so many that have made just like a really big impact. I'm going to go back to the first guest that I mentioned. Her name is Britt Frank. She's the author of a book called The Science of Stuck. She kept dropping these kind of like nuggets of truth and insight. And there is one strategy in particular that she shared with me that has become like a part of my Get Unstuck Foundation, which is a strategy that she calls micro yeses. Micro yeses is this strategy of what is the smallest thing that I can say yes to right now that will not overwhelm my nervous system? Because if you think about when you're stuck, right? Say I'm feeling stuck in my career, which I was. If I'm like, okay, I need to change my industry, I need to get this certification, I need to like network and talk to people.
Yeah.
Your body is just like power down, right? It cannot handle all of those things. So you have to break it down. And it's like, what can I do that's like a tiny step forward that is going to move me towards where I want to go? It could be sending one email to a former colleague asking to connect for coffee. It could be spending 10 minutes updating your resume. You know, it like, what are these small actions? And then you do it and then you sit, right? And am I overwhelmed? Does my nervous system still feel safe and functional? And if it does, then you do another micro yes. And over time, those micro yeses compound. And then you're able to say yes to bigger things. And all of a sudden, you're not in a stuck place. You have that forward momentum that starts to snowball that will take you from A to Z. If you start trying to go from A to Z, you're going to get stuck. You need to start with going to A to B or A to A and a half. And then over time, that's when you get to your end destination.
That is so beautiful. We had a podcast guest who said, just take any action, even if it's messy, because it propels you forward. It does something. And even if you look back and say, oh, that wasn't the right action, you still did something instead of sitting. The micro yes. I'm going to steal that too, Deanna.
Spread it far and wide. It's so helpful.
It is, because it is overwhelming if someone says, I don't like my job. And they go, oh, what do you want to do instead? Well, I think I want to be a doctor. Okay, go do it. Well, I can't just go be a doctor. There's a lot of steps I need to take. And I have a family and I have income. And then it becomes so overwhelming. You're like, okay, I'll just stay in it because it's too overwhelming.
I'll just go do something easy like scroll my phone or shut down. So yeah, the micro yes thing has been profoundly game-changing for me. And another guest that I want to talk about, she is a therapist. Her name is Dr. Ashley Southard. So she specializes in overfunctioning, specifically women overfunctioning in relationships, like doing more than your fair share for keeping your relationship healthy, happy, and moving forward. And she has a process for addressing overfunctioning because it's now, I know from the response to this episode, this is a place where a lot of women feel stuck in this constantly spinning their wheels, like trying to be the best partner and feeling like their partner is not meeting them halfway and how that erodes the relationship over time. I have been an overfunctioner for the entirety of my life and specifically in a few past relationships. And just having a name for that made me feel less stuck.
Yeah.
The response that I got of people reaching out and being like, oh my gosh, that's me, was really like profound in knowing that so many people are experiencing that stuckness, and to have a guest who has like dedicated her professional life to supporting women and healing from that, it was pretty amazing.
That's amazing. When you said that, I thought, isn't that the basis for almost every sitcom where the dude just sits there and the wife does everything? But that's like all the sitcoms.
Especially like sitcoms of like the 90s and 2000s.
Oh my God, that's it.
Yeah. But then it's like we grow up with that, we internalize it, and then we think that's what relationships are. And then we wonder why we feel stuck.
Kelly, I was thinking about the micro yeses and how when you, Kelly, have to take on a change that maybe you don't like, I think you do that almost naturally. Like you kind of break it down to here's one little thing I can do and how do I get myself moving forward on it instead of taking a bite of the whole enchilada at one time.
Yeah, because that's what I initially want to do. But then I realized I got to talk to myself down off the ledge and realize one thing at a time, which is it's hard to do because if you're especially in fear of the unknown. So you had spoken, Deanna, about like that interim phase where it's uncomfortable. You don't know what's going to come next, but you've made this change. Now what? What has helped you kind of get through that awkwardness or that feeling of uncertainty that comes when you make a change, but you don't necessarily know what's on the other side or what's to come?
Oh, it's so hard. I wish that I was able to have a solution to you for that. I still can get stuck in the fear. For me, I think there is a tipping point, right? Like, because if I knew a way to like 100% bypass that fear, I would never get stuck. As soon as I found myself in a stuck point, I would make a decision and make a change and go somewhere else. But I think there is a point where the fear and discomfort of staying the same outweighs the fear and discomfort of changing. And where, yes, it's scary to make a change, but it's even scarier to stay where you are. And so I like to say that like stuckness is a step. It's not a particularly comfortable step. It's not a particularly fun step, but it always precedes a period of major change. Because when you're in that stuck place, eventually the discomfort becomes so unbearable that you're kind of forced to figure out a way out and figure out a way forward.
So insightful, because I just think of the changes that I've gone through and why I kind of love Season of Stuck. It's not called Lifetime of Stuck because it doesn't have to be a lifetime. Like it can be a finite period of time, and you're very much in control in some ways about how long that time frame is. Because certainly I don't love change, but I've done it because I know what's there. I want to see what's on the other side. That is more exciting to me, even if I'm nervous about it.
And I will say, at least in my own experience, the more you do it, the more you embrace change, the easier it becomes. I like to joke that I'm basically Taylor Swift with the number of eras I've had in my life. Like I have gone through so many different phases and like big changes, cities, jobs, careers, relationships. And the more that I've done it, the more confidence that I have built that I can do it. So when I get to another threshold where it's clear that the path that I'm on is no longer the right path for me and I need to divert and take another path, it feels less scary. Still scary, but less scary because of like, I've done this before and I'm always okay. And I will be okay this time as well.
So we're kind of suckers for a checklist, a process, a strategy. And I think that the structure and the strategies that Deanna has talked about are really powerful, especially in times where it's tough, you're feeling a bit uncertain, and maybe there's some complexity. Having a structure is really, really helpful because you're already probably feeling a bit vulnerable. I know I can say that I felt vulnerable in moments where I didn't feel like I was good enough or something was missing or I was stuck. When you can find something to kind of hold on to kind of guide you, it helps you see the progress that you're making towards becoming, in Deanna's case, unstuck.
I was thinking about when you were talking, Kelly, of a map. And if you just said, hey, can you get to this new place in California, Carrie? It's just an empty space. Like the dot is 500 miles away, but figure it out. That is completely overwhelming and I probably won't get in the car. However, if you give me this beautiful step-by-step directions, guess what? I will arrive at my location. Like I can do it if I have a plan and a coach and help.
When you think about reframing the stuck moments, I know you've talked a little bit about how you reframe them. If someone is in the thick of it right now and they're like, I don't see an end and my season feels like it's been a lifetime, what might be a step or something that you would try and coach them to do to maintain their level of focus and see it through?
So I think when you're in the thick of stuckness and you don't see that light at the end of the tunnel, you get really stuck in stories in your head. This is going to be forever. I'm never going to succeed. Like I'm a failure. Like all of these internal narratives that are keeping you in that stuck place. It can be so loud and so overwhelming and like so incessant that it can be really, really difficult to take positive steps forward. So when I find myself stuck in stories, I like to actually like physically rewrite them. And what I mean by that is when I'm stuck and I notice that there is a certain story or thought pattern that keeps coming up. Like, let's say I'm a failure, right? I will write down that story or that insight. And then below it, I will challenge it and I will write a new story. So if the original story is I'm a failure, I will write for pages about all of the reasons that I'm a success. I will list every time I have felt successful in my life. And over time, it's like crazy how much it can change the way that you talk to yourself. Those stories that you rewrote are going to replace the negative ones that are running through your head. And once you do that, you're in a much better position to not only see the light at the end of the tunnel, but start moving towards it.
When I hear you say that, it's really about loving yourself and being a best friend to you. So that's such profound advice, something to get me, reminding me that I'm capable. And if I don't know the answer, I've got a network of people that care about me and will advocate for me and all of that.
And you bring up a really, really great point that I want to highlight as well. If you are in the place where you are so stuck that you can't challenge those negative thoughts and negative stories, find someone that loves you that can. Go to your partner. Go to the person that believes in you like the most deeply and the most unconditionally, and allow them to replace your stories until you can do it for yourself.
Yeah, for a lot of people, making changes is already hard enough. Doing it by yourself.
We're not meant to go through things alone, and the more support that you have, like the more people that can hold you up on the days that you stumble or who can push you forward on the days where it feels like you can't take one more step, like the more supportive and joyful the journey from stuck to unstuck is ultimately going to be.
So if someone's listening right now, feeling stuck and overwhelmed in a situation that we've all felt at some point or another, and you only have a minute to give them advice, Deanna, what would you tell them?
Be compassionate with yourself. Share your struggles with other people. Negate the belief that change has to be big in order for it to be impactful, and do one thing differently today. And then celebrate that one thing.
Mic drop.
Mic drop, exit stage left.
I know. What else do you say after that?
I mean, just thank you so much for just your kindness and sharing your story. And I think being so human, again, we're entering a time where there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of noise and a lot of things where people are trying to isolate themselves just to protect themselves, understandably so. Thank you for being such a fearless advocate for people in finding the best version of themselves, no matter what it looks like.
And everything right back to you. I really appreciate being a part of this. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Deanna. You're amazing. It's like a mutual love society here.
It is. We are like having like a female bromance.
I know.
Exactly.
That was Deanna DeBara, your unstuck mentor, and this is The Breakout. Kelly and I are in the business of breaking free, being brave, and living boldly. We're here to inspire you to be the badass you are meant to be. Coaching and consulting is kind of our thing, and we're really good at it. Connect with us at abrachigroup.com.
And don't forget to subscribe to The Breakout so you never miss a new episode. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And please leave us a review. Reviews help more people find the show, connect with us, and live a more authentic life. I'm Kelly Gunther.
And I'm Dr. Carrie Ulrich. See you next time.